That looks great, Mike.
Okay.
Good.
Yep, it's centered, it's good. All right, so first slide. Oops. So thank you, Catherine, and a very warm welcome to everyone. We're delighted to have you join us this evening as we take you on an adventure to the Galapagos and beyond, sharing highlights from our HHUC trip to that area of the world in 2013. You've already met Karen Parisian, who is also one of our presenters this evening, but I'd like to introduce you to the other members of the presentation team. Perhaps give a wave when I call your name. So, you know Karen, and we'll move on to Jason Grenier, Les
Hello.
Buck, Margaret Kolitar, Roberta Lee, and Mike Starr, who's also running our PowerPoint presentation. Now, all of our presenters are intrepid adventurers who individually and collectively have worked to put together the story of our travels that we're about to share with you. We will have a question and answer period, as Catherine has alluded to, following the presentation. So if you have a question that comes to mind along the way, please do enter it type it into the chat box, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen in the middle. We will collect those and respond to your questions when we get to that part of the evening. As Catherine has also mentioned, planning, organizing, and leading HHUC dive trips to exotic destinations is something that I've been passionately engaged in since 2001. I think fueled by my love of the sport and my want to do more adventure travel myself. So coming up to 20 years and over 30 trips later, it's still something I love doing, as well as sharing in these adventures with others. Next slide, Mike. Like many divers, one of the places I'd always dreamed about diving was the Galapagos, it being one of the most sought after dive destinations in the world. So my original idea for this trip was centered on realizing that dream through planning a week-long dive liveaboard adventure in these islands. As I started to talk about this idea with my friends in the club, I discovered that there were other people who also had the Galapagos and the big animals it's famous for on their wish lists of dive destinations to visit. So the trip gained momentum, and then we ended up in very short order with a group of people who really, really wanted to go. As we continued to discuss our trip in more detail, the interest and excitement expanded because after all, we were going all the way to Ecuador. So why not see some of the other things that were available to us in the hood? How about an eco-adventure into the Ecuadorian Amazon? Wow. A road trip and hiking in the Andes, cool. And since it's right next door, how about trekking to Machu Picchu in Peru? Okay, we're on. So off we went on this odyssey in a time period that spanned from the end of July, just past the middle of August in 2013. Now, not everyone did all of the trip segments, but everyone had incredible experiences, took home life-lasting memories from whichever part of the trip they participated in, and came away with many a fascinating story to share. So come along with us to the Galapagos and beyond, where the wild things really are. I'm going to ask Karen to start us out by providing an introduction to these unique islands.
Well, I'm not one of the wild ones, but I know some if you want to know the wild ones. I just want to start by saying that whether you look at the Galapagos Islands from a historical perspective, a diversity perspective, or even from an adventure perspective, you can use adjectives like magnificent, stunning, and breathtaking to describe these islands, and you won't be wrong. The Galapagos Islands are part of the Republic of Ecuador and are located about 1,000 kilometers off the coast of South America in the Pacific Ocean. This archipelago of 19 volcanic islands is situated both in the northern and southern hemispheres, and also on both sides of the equator. Next slide. So Darwin is the northernmost island, and Espanola is the most southern island with a distance of 427 kilometers between them. The waters around the islands incorporate the Galapagos Marine Reserve, which is one of the largest and most biologically diverse marine protection areas in the world, covering 130,000 square kilometers around the islands. Next slide. I mentioned that these are all volcanic islands, so it's, I think, interesting to understand their origin. So the Galapagos is located along the Nazca Oceanic Tectonic Plate. This perpetually moving plate is heading eastward over the Galapagos hotspot and has formed the chain of islands. A hotspot is a place in the Earth's mantle that is much hotter than usual. As the tectonic plate moves across these hotspots, it essentially burns a hole and creates a volcano. Next slide. These islands were formed through the layering and lifting of repeated volcanic action. This geological movement is correlated to the age of the islands. The Galapagos Islands are quite young, probably no more than 5 million years old. The eastern islands like San Cristobal and Espanola are millions of years older than the western islands like Isabella and Fernandina. In fact, Fernandina is the youngest of the islands at less than 1 million years of age. It's also the most volcanically active and sits at the center of the volcanic hotspot that created the Galapagos Islands. Next slide. Most of the islands have a distinct conical shape that is often associated with volcanic action. The mountainous islands have been formed through continuing eruption, building layer upon layer. Due to this volcanic formation, the islands are characterized by many steep slopes with heights ranging from a few meters above sea level to more than 1,500 meters above sea level. Each major island, with the exception of the largest island, Isabella, consists of a single large volcano. Isabella, however, was formed when 6 volcanoes joined above sea level. Next slide. So just as the volcanic history has made the Galapagos so unique above the water, it is the currents that flow below the islands that makes the underwater world of the Galapagos so amazing, but also so challenging to dive. The Humboldt Current, also known as the Peru Current, is one of the biggest influences on the Galapagos, bringing nutrient-rich water to help sustain the rich biodiversity of the islands. This cold ocean current runs north along the western coast of South America and turns west near the equator. The Humboldt is one of the slowest and shallowest ocean currents, but it is one of the largest and carries water for longer distances. The cold South Equatorial Current flows west through the Galapagos and comes from the Humboldt Current. The warm Panama Current, which flows in from the north heading west, also influences the islands. There are also countercurrents flowing east through the Galapagos. The very deep Cromwell Current is an eastward flowing subsurface current that extends the length of the equator in the Pacific Ocean. You can understand now when we talk about washing machine being when you're underwater in the Galapagos Islands. These currents and countercurrents have a huge effect on the underwater world, especially for those of us diving in that environment. So now that we have some information on the effects of nature on the Galapagos Islands, let's take a look at the human exploration of the Galapagos. Next slide. Fray Thomas de Berlanga was the first documented visitor to the Galapagos in 1535. He was traveling from Spain to Peru to settle a land dispute. Seems easy enough. At a critical point in their voyage, unfortunately, there was no wind for the sails, and the currents, the ones I've just talked about, carried the ship to the Galapagos. So when he finally got off of the islands, he brought back tales of giant tortoises and the lack of water on the islands to King Charles V, bringing attention to these islands. His writings actually allowed for early maps of the coast of South America to begin to include the Galapagos. By the 1800s, the Ecuadorian government was starting to settle the islands. Penal colonies were some of the first established. And of course, we know that the most acclaimed visitor to these islands was Charles Darwin. His work and publications have been the single biggest influence on the islands and only reinforces our understanding of the biodiversity of the islands. In 1835, he visited 4 of them as part of his scientific voyage. He made some observations when he was there, but it was actually retrospectively in analyzing his samples back in England that he realized the full significance of the differences among the species on this island. His most famous publication on the origin of species was published in 1859. So it describes Darwin's interpretation of the mechanism that underlies evolutionary change and survival of the fittest. So this is where the term natural selection was born. Next slide. Boy, the Galapagos Islands come with a large number of citations. It's a national park, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it's one of the 7 underwater wonders of the world, and there are 30,000 permanent residents of the Galapagos Islands, spanning 4 inhabited islands that get to enjoy this every day. Next slide. When we talk about the Galapagos Islands are the epitome of biodiversity. So 80% of the birds, 97% of the reptiles and land mammals, 30% of the plants, and 20% of the marine species you find in the Galapagos, you will find nowhere else on Earth. So this is an amazing statistic. And the wildlife on the islands have no natural predators. We know that Galapago means tortoise in Spanish, and the giant tortoise is probably the most recognizable creature of the islands. They arrived in the Galapagos from mainland South America 2 to 3 million years ago, where they underwent diversification into 15 species, differing in their morphology and distribution. And you may have heard of poor old Lonesome George the tortoise. He was the last known individual of his species, the Pinta Island tortoise. He died in 2012 at over 100 years of age. And currently there are now only 10 living species of tortoise remaining in the Galapagos. So next slide. So if you plan on diving to the Galapagos, understand that it is a hot and rainy from December to June, averaging around 80 degrees, and it is drier and fairly cool from June to November, averaging around 70 degrees. If you are diving and then doing other adventures in the area, you may have some challenges with packing. You notice Mike, this was only one of his pieces of luggage. He had a couple of other carts behind him, but we managed to get all of his luggage on the boat with us. So there are 2 jumping off points to the Galapagos. The first is Quito, the capital of Ecuador. It's the country's 2nd largest city and sits at an altitude of 2,850 meters. It's 4,800 kilometers from Toronto to Quito. If you were trying to fly there today, good luck with that. There are flights with American Airlines and Copa Airlines, which is a Panamanian airline. From Quito, it's now 1,200 kilometers to San Cristobal Island or 1,300 kilometers to Baltra Island. These are the 2 islands in the Galapagos with airports. The other alternative, if you want to fly to Ecuador, is to go to Guayaquil, which is a major port city and the most populous city in Ecuador. And it's about 5,100 kilometers from Toronto. Whichever city you're flying from, especially if you're diving, you should probably take a day or 2 in the city before going on, just to recover from the flight and prepare for diving. So I'll go to next slide, and Rebecca, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Next slide, Mike.
We're good.
One of the first questions that comes to mind when you think about going to a destination you haven't been there before is, when's the best time to go? Well, when it comes to the Galapagos, the answer to that would be anytime. But your decision about when you go will depend on what you want to see. The Galapagos is known for its big animal encounters due to, as Karen's mentioned, the strong currents that bring in all the nutrients that attract the large schools of fish in the thousands, and hence the pelagics. There are actually 2 defined seasons with accompanying seasonal climate changes that happen with the changing current flows that define diving in the Galapagos. So our group interest was for whale shark season. And you see on the screen a whale shark. Whale shark season is from June to November, with the winter months within that time period of July, August, and September acknowledged as the high season for Galapagos diving. It's also the season of the colder water temperatures. So thinking mid 60s to mid 70s, colder in the Western Islands, This is, it's also colder air temperature as well in the 60s and 70s. And this is, of course, influenced by the prevalence of the cold water currents and their strength at that time of year. Also accompanied by low visibility, as these currents bring in so many nutrients to the area. At this time of year, you will also get a steady breeze from the trade winds and often misty conditions, mistier as you move north through the islands, certainly up at Wolf and Darwin all the time, pretty much. So it can feel damp and chilly. However, don't be dissuaded, because combining these lower air and water temperatures is perfect for whale sharks. Next slide. The other main season for diving in the Galapagos is referred to as manta season, which runs from December to May. Now, just a caveat here, those mantas you see in the picture are not from our photos because we didn't see mantas, because we didn't go in manta season. But they're lovely mantas, and thank you, Mike, for sourcing those. Anyway, manta season is the warmer season, so accompanied by both water and topside temperatures that are 6 to 10 degrees higher than during whale shark season in the winter period, and also clearer visibility. This season is marked for the increase, not just in giant manta rays for sure, but also large numbers in the hundreds of different types of rays, mobile rays, golden rays, cow-nosed, spotted eagle rays, and the list goes on. Next slide, Mike. Now, the other thing that people go to the Galapagos to see is the hammerheads. And they are prevalent in the islands year round, particularly up at Wolf and Darwin Islands in the north, as are many other types of sharks prevalent throughout the islands and even more so in the north. Galapagos sharks, white tips, black tips, silky sharks, and the list goes on. There are a number of options for the way you can go diving in the Galapagos. You can do day trips from shore with a licensed operator. I might say that whatever choice you make about how you're going to dive in the Galapagos, it's all tightly regulated in order to protect the environment and including the animals. So you can do day trips from shore with a licensed operator, short cruises that would have some diving, snorkeling, kayaking opportunities. Or if you're a die-hard diver, and everybody in our group was, you want to do a dive live aboard, which incidentally is the only way to dive up at Wolf and Darwin, which are the crown jewels of the Galapagos and arguably the best dive sites in the world. Karen's going to pick this up now and share with us much more about the diving environment as we experienced it.
Okay, next slide. So if you are considering diving in the Galapagos, there are a number of things you should reflect on. This is definitely what we would consider to be advanced diving. You're dealing with currents, visibility issues, deeper dives, negative entries, swells, surge, and my favorite, cold water. So depending on your location, the currents will be moderate to strong. You may need to hang on to rocks to stay in place during a dive. Safety stops can be challenging with the free ascents. You need good buoyancy control at all times, along with good self-awareness and good buddy awareness. Your fitness level has to match the challenges of this environment. You should be nitrox certified. On the live aboard, you are doing multiple dives for multiple days. Because of the water temperature and the multiple day diving, a 5 to 7 millimeter suit is recommended, as well as Kevlar gloves to protect your hands while you're hanging onto the rocks. Dives are typically 20 to 30 meters in depth, and you may find some thermoclines on certain dives. So I want to take you through a typical dive. There are easier places to dive in the Galapagos, but I'm going to focus on diving around Wolf Island and Darwin Island. This is where all the high intensity diving occurs. Wolf and Darwin Islands are two eroded volcanoes that sit on the Wolf-Darwin volcanic ridge. The islands are only tips of these massive volcanoes that reach over 1,000 meters from the seafloor. Next slide. So each dive is going to start with a briefing, where we're going, what we'll see, what the water conditions will be, review of safety instructions, then it's on the back deck and time to gear up. All dive sites are accessed in a panga. Once you're fully suited up in all your gear and have done a gear check with your buddy, you hand your fins down and step into the panga. Next slide. And take a seat on the side of the boat. If you forget some piece of equipment, you will find yourself sitting in the panga for the duration of the dive. Trust me, I know this. Once you reach the dive site, you have your fins on. Let me just play through this. Gets a little crowded on the back of the panga for sure. The next slide. It's okay. We'll just let this play through.
I always went for that back corner so I wouldn't get kicked in the head when we went over.
I know the worst place to sit on the panga, will give you advice, is I think right where Jason is sitting, right in the middle. I'm sitting next to him. I think I always hit him in the face every time I went over. So here's your fins. Now you're going to put your fins on. And then you make sure all the air is out of your buoyancy compensator when you get to the dive spot. Then it's basically 1, 2, 3. And everybody does a backward roll off the boat simultaneously and heads immediately to the bottom. So the strong currents don't separate you. Trying to get oriented once you do a back roll and not having any air in your BC, you can see is sometimes a challenge. You really want to stay together as a group, because once you're underwater, the currents do take hold, and you want to be together as we head towards what we call as the theater. We're basically going to hang on to some rocks and gather, and really it's an amphitheater. You are sitting there and watching the show. So now we're just taking some time to get down. If you have trouble clearing your ears, this is always a challenge, trying to get down quickly. And if you hear on this video, you can see the striations, the volcanic striations in here. We go on to the next one, Mike. So you can see how the water is actually really moving, and they tell us just to get down, hang on to a rock, and then we let the show pass in front of us. So once you're back on the surface, for me, the real fun begins. You want to stay as much as possible with the group. There may be several groups on the surface, and you may have to wait for a pickup. When the panga gets to you, you will hang onto a rope on the side and remove your BC, hand it up, and then remove your fins. You'll then climb up the small ladder to get back to the panga. And I think this video is a bit of a misnomer because, you know, it's way too calm. I remember a lot of dives in Darwin and Wolf where the waves were kind of pounding over the panga. So we had a much more fun getting in. This seems way too calm. So next slide, Mike. So remember, you are doing all of this in waves, current, and surge perhaps. Chances are, if you do enough dives, you will at some point surface some distance from the panga, and you may not be visible to the tenders. You will always have your safety equipment with you. If you are separated, you want to inflate your surface marker buoy to identify your position. You would use an audible surface signaling device, like an air horn or whistle, to help attract attention. In addition, this is my favorite part, the liveaboard will ensure that each person carries an electronic surface tracking device in case of prolonged separation. So that electronic surfacing tracking device is on the left-hand side of the screen. And then we have the air horn, your surface marker buoy. I also like to have a strobe light with me. If you're in darker environments, could be nighttime, it's easier to attract attention that way. And so underwater is always spectacular in the Galapagos, but you never know what surprise awaits you on the surface. So Mike, next slide. So we always have to talk about our favorite memories. And I do recall we came up from a dive and there were hundreds of dolphins swimming all around us as we sat in the panga at the end of the dive. So enjoy our little friends. Rebecca, we're on to you.
All righty. Next slide. Whoops, I think it should be backtrack, but here we are on our luxury dive yacht, Galapagos Sky, getting an introduction to and briefing from the crew, and it looks like we're having a toast here, a libation. Our luxury dive yacht was our home, away from home for the week, and not only our luxury dive yacht, but we also got a panga to take us to the dive sites, and to we're off on this one to our to one of our topside tours. Essentially, a liveaboard dive yacht is a luxury floating dive resort. Next slide, Mike.
Mike enjoyed drinking so much, he just wanted to have that one more time.
There you are. Okay, so Galapagos Sky is a typical dive liveaboard in the Galapagos in the luxury class, in that it is about 120 feet long. It is has a maximum capacity of 16 passengers. And 8 staterooms, and you can see over on the right-hand side a typical stateroom set up for 2 people. The beds can also be put together to allow for a single bed for couples if that's their preference. And the staterooms are very nicely appointed, and each has its own private bath with hot water shower, and there was lots of hot water, and cushy bathrobes, and you can see those, they're actually above the pillows on the bed there. And yeah, so a luxury dive yacht is intended to cater to a diver's every need, and most of those revolve around eating, sleeping, and diving. So you've seen the sleeping part here. In terms of the eating part, you'll see a picture of the dining room setup. Very nice. The meals were delicious and nutritious. 3 meals a day, snacks morning and afternoon, combination of buffet and table service. What's not to like? You'll see us in the bottom left-hand corner there at one of our meals. We're actually, we're toasting again. This time is the dinner of the day we saw our first whale shark. So we ordered champagne. There's also lots of other places to relax on the dive yacht. You see on the upper left corner, Tammy's doing some journaling there and a little bit of sun. I'm trying to get a picture of me at the top there with the Darwin Arch in the background. We've got folks lounging in the bottom right corner, and you get the idea. We had frigate birds with us up at Wolf and Darwin the whole time we were there. And they were so friendly. You could be up right in their face and they would not move. They would simply pose for you to take pictures and go about their business doing bird stuff because they're not afraid. And so, as I've said, if you couldn't get a good picture of these birds, you should give up I'm not trying to take any. Um,
Well, they didn't
anyway,
even have to pay. They didn't even have to pay for the trip.
No, they didn't have to pay for the trip. Anyway, there's also a very large, sun deck on the top, over on the left-hand side in the middle. You'll see that it's covered. I think Mike is actually sleeping in one of those hammocks. You saw the dive deck as we were gearing up there. It's very large and very efficiently run. Big camera tables, lots of storage. Their compressors in terms of filling tanks. They got hoses that go around and do that without even taking the tanks, separating the tanks from your dive kit. As soon as you get out of the water and get your wetsuit off, we got staff there rinsing it out, hanging it up, giving you a hot towel and a hot snack and a hot drink, and then you run for the hot shower. And it's repeat, repeat, repeat. So a wonderful, wonderful way to spend a week. Okay, so we're on this dive yacht. Aside from eat, sleep, where did we actually go diving? Next slide, Mike. What route did we take? Okay, here we are, back to a map of the Galapagos Islands. We landed in Baltra in the Central Islands. Karen had mentioned that's one of the two airports. It's the busiest one. And we boarded our vessel and left from there. If you follow the red arrows, that day that we boarded, we actually did a checkout dive in the vicinity of Baltra. And then we started making our way north. The next day, we did a full day of diving and topside tours, again in the Central Islands. And then we made the long trek up to Wolf and Darwin, which at best is a 14-hour trip. If the currents are helping you along, it can take longer. So a very, very long way. So the red arrow at the end of it is, and the north, is at Wolf and Darwin. And we spent several days there diving, and both of those locations, multiple dive sites. As I said, remarkable and touted to be amongst, if not the best in the world. And then we started to make our way back south, and this is against the current, so it takes longer. We got over to Isabella Island. I called it it looks like a seahorse. And the mouth of the seahorse is a place called Punta Vicente Roca. And we did some diving there. This is in the Western Islands. My apologies, that's my landline phone ringing. I'll just let it go. The joys of broadcasting from home. Anyway, yes, the Western Islands are the coldest, so our diving there was in temperatures of 52 degrees. Definitely chilly in one layer of 7mm suit. We then made our way up and around the Seahorse's Head and back towards the Central Islands, down to Santa Cruz, where we did some topside touring, which you'll be hearing about, and then over to San Cristobal, where we also did topside touring and left to fly back to the mainland. All right, so what did we see underwater? Going to provide you with some highlights here because we saw thousands and thousands of fish and species, but we will provide you with some highlights, starting with the Central Islands. Okay, in the Central Islands, definitely cavorting with the sea lions was so much fun. They love to commune with divers, and they're everywhere. They're inquisitive, playful, incredibly fast, very cheeky, particularly liking to bite and pull on your fins. I had brand new fins that got teeth marks in them that day, and I giggle every time I look at those fins now, and it's very fond memories. They like to stick their noses in the camera lenses and yeah, just be playful with you. There were also lots and lots of turtles in the Central Islands, as there were throughout the Galapagos, different kinds of rays. And let's just follow this turtle for a little bit, because he got up close and personal with the camera here in a little bit before we move on. There are a lot of green sea turtles as well as leatherback turtles in the Galapagos. Oh, he's deciding to make his exit. Okay. Now, in the Central Islands, not to be forgotten, are what we call micro magic moments. So there's just this slide is to show you just there's such a wide array of sea creatures, fish, and so on in the Central Islands, as throughout the Galapagos, for you to enjoy. So everything from scorpion fishes and puffer fishes to really interesting and colorful sea stars. We got a small horn shark in this picture. We've got crabs and schools of very colorful fish, smaller fish. But I want to draw your attention to, from the left, move to the second column from the left, in the middle is a most peculiar fish, which has red lips, and it is called the red-lipped batfish. And I draw your attention to this because it's only found in the Galapagos and on coastal Peru. So of course we all wanted to see a red-lipped batfish. Well, once we got up to the Northern Islands, there was only one night dive offered, and that's not unusual. There's generally not night diving in the Galapagos, but there was one night dive offered when we got up to the Northern Islands, and it was specifically to be able to see the red-lipped batfish. Now, about half of our group took the opportunity to do this dive. I did not. It was at 10 o'clock at night. It was to 100 feet on a reverse profile. And I figured I could pass on the red-lipped batfish. However, told you, intrepid adventurers went, and lo and behold, they found and filmed the red-lipped batfish and came back to lord it over us, that they had seen it. All fine, but much to their chagrin, a couple of days later, in the Western Islands, we did a morning dive, and all of us saw lots of red-lipped batfish at 40 feet. So anyway, from their point of view, you got to take the opportunities when they present. Okay, next slide, Mike. We're going up to Wolf and Darwin. And this first view just shows you the sheer magnitude of scale, abundance, and stunning diversity of sea life. It's mind-blowing, unforgettable, it's out of this world, but still in it. On every dive, we were immersed in thousands of fish, huge schools of barracuda, tuna, and sharks, and more sharks. Galapagos sharks, black tip, white tip, silky, and of course, hammerheads. You're actually going to see a Galapagos shark coming into view here. Yeah, there we are. Galapagos sharks as well as hammerheads in this view. Anyway, hammerheads on every dive, from dozens to hundreds. They would cruise in front of us as we clung to the lava rocks. They would school above us, such as the picture that's my backdrop here tonight. And if you look at them, they're swimming against the current here with total ease. And this current is ripping. I got to tell you, if you saw the bubbles when Karen was showing, they were going sideways. And yeah, so absolutely magnificent. Les shared with me recently that Les Buck, who's one of our presenters, that in his logbook from these dives, he put a lot of superlatives, including, believe it or not, I even wrote, holy hardware store, Batman, hammerheads everywhere. And they were. It was just, as I say, out of this world. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Now, towards the end of one of our dives, just out of nowhere, emerged 13 eagle rays in formation. Are we going to that slide, Mike? Oh, I see some rays coming in the background there. There we go. Anyway, this was a real treat because, again, they were so beautiful and in formation, performed this most amazing ballet for us. And again, a moment that reinforced this is truly where the wild things are. As this video moves through, I just want to share with you a lot of the video that you're seeing tonight. Mike has done a lot of work on in terms of trying to get it stabilized because taking photographs and video is incredibly challenging in this environment because of the currents and difficulties with stability. But anyway, here's our beautiful creatures. I think it's a tale of the story. Moving away. And then the highlights. Whale shark, whale shark. The dive master had told us, we had rehearsed this. If I give you a particular signal, you all gotta let go of the rocks, fin as fast as you possibly can, follow me, which we all did, out into the blue, and then out of nowhere, God knows how they know this, out of nowhere comes some amazing whale shark. Now, you may have seen whale sharks in other destinations, such as the Mexican Riviera, Utila, and so on, as have I. But there is nothing compares to the size of the whale sharks you see in whale shark season in the Galapagos. These are the size of 18-wheelers or semi-trailers. So certainly close to 40 feet, but not unusual for them to be 40 to 60 feet. And these were. Many of these are very large females. And it is thought that they give birth during this time of year in and around the Galapagos. And while there's a lot of research going on about that, it still remains an unsolved mystery. Again, this creature looks like it's moving very slowly. Believe me, it is not. And although some of our divers tried to give it a run for its money, I would say don't try a chase because it's a race that's never been won. So while it looks like it's moving slowly, it is really trucking along. You will also see that it's accompanied by a whole host of remoras and other fish to get in on the treats. For those of you who don't know, whale sharks are the biggest fish in the ocean. They are filter feeders, so their mouth is easily 5 feet across, and they're feeding on the plankton. So really gentle giants, but I can tell you they have powerful tails. Anyway, that was our first whale shark, and we toasted it that evening at the boat. So I really, this is what we went there for, and we weren't disappointed. Okay, so now I'm taking you over to the Western Islands, and this was the place, the Seahorse's Mouth, Punta Vicente Roca. very cold water here, 52 degrees. But hey, I'm going, yeah, we all went, because what they promised was for us to get up close and personal with the molas. And a mola is a sunfish. And there's one right in front of you here on the screen. Now, as I say, again, it was low visibility. So you can Google it and get a clear picture if you want to follow this up, because they are very unique. They are very unique. They're often in pairs, and we did get to commune with a pair of them. They come in a number of varieties, but they're all characterized by this odd body shape, which is about the same length horizontally as it is vertically. And it looks like a fish head with no tail. But in fact, as they've evolved, their tail has been replaced with kind of a lumpy pseudo tail that's a bit scalloped at the back end, and it provides a rudder for the fish. Anyway, they're fascinating. These that we saw looked like aluminum foil on the outside, and we got really close, like within 5 to 10 feet of these animals. And their name as sunfish is because they love to go to the surface, lie on their side, and bask in the sun while they hunt deep. Well, I get that entirely, because after 52 degrees at 100 feet with these guys, I couldn't wait to go to the surface and bask in the sun either. So there's another picture of the mola, particularly zeroing in on the mouth. They have a beak-like mouth with fused teeth. They're big on eating jellyfish, as well as lots of other things. Anyway, I thought I'd never see one of these. And so this was a total surprise, and just an incredible memory. Okay, so next slide, Mike. If you go to the Galapagos, I'm going to give you our top 10 dive travel tips if you're going there. There's a beautiful picture with our dive yacht. That is that's at Punta Vicente Roca in the Western Islands. Okay, here we go. Number 1, book ahead in terms of what season you want to go. If it's high season, book at least a year ahead, if not 2 years out. I checked for this dive yacht for next year. They've already got a lot of bookings gone. Anyway, this is a hot dive destination, always has been. And so book ahead, and you'll rarely get deals in the low season, in the high season. But after COVID, who knows? Okay, number 2. Karen has mentioned, I would reinforce it, but for a different reason. You will be required to spend a night on the mainland before coming out to the Galapagos, and also going back to connect with your flights. Spend more time, because particularly on the way out, in case your luggage does not make it to Ecuador with you, because there's no way to get it out to you once you've left the mainland, or with great difficulty. Number 3, dive liveaboards like Galapagos Sky are expensive. So make sure you do your homework in terms of the various operators in the area, and book with a reputable agent. I've always worked trips out with Scuba Holidays, SQUBA Holidays, and they've provided met our needs consistently in an excellent way. And they specialize in organizing dive travel individually and for groups. But this is also really important in case your trip goes off the rails and you need to try and make any claims. All right, because you have that protection. Number 4, to get the most out of your experience and to enjoy it and to be safe, reinforcing what Karen said, you have to be fit to dive to go to this location. Even snorkeling can be very demanding in a 5 to 7 mil wetsuit with weights on, in current, and low visibility, with a lot of surge usually as well. Make sure you practice before you go. Brockville's a great place to practice before going diving in the Galapagos. Okay, seasickness can be an issue on a liveaboard, and particularly out here in with all the waves and so on in the season that we were there. Plan a strategy in advance. Ours is to start taking gravel before you get on and keep doing it throughout throughout the length of the week. See your physician before you go, make sure you're healthy, and you will need to take a comprehensive first aid kit. I think I could do a separate seminar on how to prepare for dive trips to out of the way locations, because there's nothing out there. So if you've got ear, nose, throat, gastrointestinal, urinary tract, whatever issues while you're on this trip, it could really, really interfere with your enjoyment, if not preclude you from diving. Number 7, the Kevlar gloves, can't reinforce that enough. If you wear neoprene gloves, well, if you want to get rid of them, fine, because they'll shred on the first dive. Number 8, take enough swimsuits and rash guards to put on dry for each dive, particularly in the cold season. It's all about the layers, top side as well, and remember your sunscreen, because this is very, very close to the equator. Pack your stuff in soft-sided luggage. It's much easier in terms of the types of flights you take to get there, as well as if you're on a dive liveaboard, you have to put your luggage under the bed. And then, you know, everybody wants to take pictures to remember their vacation. So number 10 is, do I take stills or video? Taking stills is really challenging unless you're a very experienced photographer, or perhaps if you're in one of the places where there is a certain amount of calm. So many people choose something like a GoPro or equivalent that they can pull some stills from, because it's just, it's easier. It's difficult for stills in terms of framing, the current, the low visibility, the list goes on. Anyway, so that's it. Next slide, Mike. We will end our dive portion here with a view of the Darwin Arch, which is the iconic photo that everyone wants to have and show to their friends and their family. I was there, I dove it, and it was an amazing, amazing experience. But never mind, there's lots of other amazing experiences. What is there to do besides diving? Jason, take it away.
All right, thank you, Rebecca. Next slide, please. So I have the opportunity to share with you, my friends, what we saw topside on the Galapagos Islands. And we had the opportunity to take land tours on 4 different islands. And in the next few slides, I'll bring you through that and show you what we saw. So next slide, please, Mike. Our first excursion was to Bartolome Island. This is one of the newer or younger islands of the Galapagos Island formation, and it is an unpopulated, there's no human inhabitants on this island. It was named after Sir Bartholomew James Sullivan, who was a lieutenant aboard the HMS Beagle, the famous voyage carrying Charles Darwin to the islands. You can see in the top left from our yacht, the dive liveaboard, we take the Panga ride over to the island, and immediately you're greeted by a diverse number of animals that are there. Not shown in the picture, but was on the steps there, are sea lions that were waiting there. In the center photo on the top, there's the marine iguana, which is one of the endemic species to the Galapagos Islands. In the top right, there's the Sally Lightfoot crab. You can see here our guide was able to pick one up and educate us and tell us a few things about that. Also not shown in the pictures here, but on the island, it's very common to see a variety of birds, the blue-footed booby bird, and as I mentioned, sea lions as well. So the bottom pictures show how we get around on this island. To minimize the impact to the island, there is a paved stairway, approximately 400 stairs that take you up to about 100 meters or so above sea level. And that is to a viewpoint. And along the way, you can see the lava tubes, the formation of the land, and a variety of pioneer plants, which are first to establish roots in new ground, which this was a volcanic formed island. And so you have things like the lava cactus, which is shown in the bottom right, and some other species that, again, are only found in this area of the world. On our way up to the viewpoint, if we go to the next slide, again, about 100 meters above sea level, provides a spectacular view of the Galapagos Islands. And on a clear day, if you look around, you can see up to about 10 islands from this viewpoint. So very picturesque and an opportunity for us to have a group photo as shown there. In the bottom right, there's a photo of Pinnacle Rock, which is a very famous, it's actually a volcanic vent. It's a very famous picture that you'll see when someone's talking about the Galapagos Islands typically. So that's Bartolome Island. If we move on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about Isabella Island and specifically Punta Vincente Roca. Isabel Island is the largest island to the Galapagos Island. As Rebecca mentioned earlier, its shape resembles a seahorse if you look at it on the map. It's located over a hotspot, which still has volcanic activity until today. There is a small human population on this island, approximately 2,200 people, mostly located in the south of the island. And you can see on this island here, we had the opportunity to take a ride in the panga and go around a certain point, a certain part of this part of the island. We could really appreciate the formations of the rock structures that are shown. And in this area, there's a small cavern that we were able to go into and have a tour. So these excursions provide an excellent opportunity to see the top side of the Galapagos. Very nice thing to be able to do well. If you're a diver, you understand a sit interval or a minimum time you should wait between your dives. These are really amazing excursions to do while you're waiting for diving. And if we go to the next slide, on this location, we were able to see also some marine life, some animals, basking in the sun, something that I think we like to do after a day of 4 scuba dives, sleeping, enjoying the sunshine and against the rocks. In the upper right, there's some birds. Those are naughty birds. And in the bottom left, again, some marine iguanas. And this area, this particular location had a number of turtles. Here's a picture of one of them, but there was many at this location. All right, if we go to the next slide, please. We'll go to Santa Cruz Island, specifically Puerto Ayora. And this is, in terms of human population, this is the most developed of the islands. There's approximately 18,000 people that live on this island. It is the island with the most green areas in the archipelago, which hence implies an opportunity for agriculture. So it can support and does support a little bit of a higher population compared to the other islands. This island is home to the Charles Darwin Research Station, which looks at giant tortoises, basically. It was established in 1959 and it allows for scientific research and conservation projects. This research station is essential to providing scientific knowledge and technical advice to the government of Ecuador to ensure the conservation efforts of the Galapagos Islands. The tortoises here are, there's a tortoise area and it's named after Fausto Llanera Breeding Center. Don Fausto, as he's known, dedicated more than 43 years of his life to conservation efforts of the Galapagos Islands and specifically the tortoises. The objective of the center is to rebuild what was almost an extinct population of tortoises, especially those from the Española Island, which were down to about 6 left in existence, and due to their efforts are more than 1,000 of these tortoises today. One of the famous tortoises was Lonesome George, who unfortunately passed away in 2012, as I think Karen mentioned. He was in fact the last of his particular species, which was unfortunate, but there was a lot of efforts to try and find others of his species, but regrettably that wasn't. But this research station does tremendous work towards the conservation of tortoises. And they're showing here some pictures. These tortoises can live for several hundred years. They're really remarkable. And one of the things I'll mention is that their shells are adapted to match the terrain and the vegetarian of the island that they're from. So if you look closely, if you're there or have the opportunity to see some of these online or in person, their shells are unique and have adapted through evolution to to match the islands from which they came. And finally, the next slide, the last island we had the opportunity to see was San Cristobal Island. Here, although there's many things to do, our limited time on the island was focused on the Interpretation Center, which is a definite worthwhile stop along the way. And the Interpretation Center offers the opportunity to overview the natural history of the Galapagos Islands, which is looking at the different natural facts, such as the volcanic origins of the islands, the distance between the islands, the currents and the special climate, and the arrival of different species throughout time and then throughout the year and the cycles that evolve. It also dedicates a portion of the museum to the human history, which chronicles the most significant events related to the discovery and the colonization of the Galapagos Islands. It also highlights some of the conservation efforts today that are underway to preserve and protect the Galapagos Islands. One of the big efforts was the struggle to control invasive species. So when people came, often through boats or other means, there was the introduction of rats, pigs, goats, and dogs. These invasive species are very harmful for the endemic species, which have pretty much no natural predators. And so there's efforts there to help mitigate those issues. So I think that wraps up the 4 islands that we had the opportunity to see on the top side. I'll pass it off to my friend and fellow trip participant, Les Buck, to talk about the Ecuadorian Amazon rainforest.
Thanks, Jason. I just want to echo what Rebecca said about mola mola and whale sharks. I never thought I would see them, and that's just mind-blowing. So I really highly recommend the Galapagos excursion. This slide is showing you our itinerary. This was a week before we went to the Galapagos. So we landed in Quito, and you can see on the large map, of course, I have a coastal map showing you where Ecuador is. We've already seen that. I've expanded that to the area in the Andes, where we landed in Quito and explored the area around, or mountains around the Andes. And then we explored the Western Amazon. I'm using my mouse as if you can see it, and I realize you can't now. So where you see Quito, we traveled, thanks, Mike. We traveled back to the airport in Quito. We flew all the way over to Coco, a small town on the Napo River. And then we motored downriver to Sasha Lodge. You can see downriver roughly where the lodge is located. That was a 2-hour trip. And then after 4 days or 3 nights, we reversed the trip, went up to where you see the hacienda for a couple of nights. We visited Cayambe, a volcano, which we'll show you some photos of. And then we went to Otavalo. We spent a night there, toured the town and saw the market. And Palula Wa, which is you'll see another volcanic crater. So next slide, please. Should be a video. This is just an overview video of some of the things that we did at Sasha Lodge. And I'll get more into the lodge in a moment. This is you can see above there is a lookout tower that you can climb up and see a nice view outside. This is our trip down the river. And there are a lot of nice things to see. That was pretty exciting too. Here we are on Pilchicocha Lake, and we're canoeing over to the lodge. And so far in the distance, that's the lodge where we're staying. I'll get to this in a minute, but on our walk over to the lake, we encountered some leafcutter ants, and they're quite fun to watch as they march right across our path, each carrying a piece of leaf back to their underground burrow. Here, this is an aerial view of Sasha Lodge, front and center and top there. That's the dock. You see a canoe. That's not our canoe, but anyhow, that's our loading area or landing area. And we would paddle up through that channel to the main lodge, which you can't see. And now I've noticed, because I've taken this picture off the web, you'll see to the right of that image, there's a pen there, and that pen has a mesh bottom. And there's a good reason for that I'll come to in a moment. On the left is an example of a group canoeing through the flooded forest. It's a massive 2,000 hectare expanse of land that's pristine, and it was wet season, so we had lots of water present. Lower right, you can just see the top of the main dining area and reception area. And in behind that, I wish that photo would have covered this, but you can see our huts connected by a boardwalk. Next slide, please. This is inside the main dining area, looking up to the lookout tower. It's all thatched roof. And this is one of the reasons, well, I'll tell you why they have that mesh pen now. You can see the top left corner, that's our boardwalk that's going in between our cabins, which are fantastic. Our cabin particularly had a glass window in the bathroom, so when you're taking a shower, you're looking into the forest and all kinds of wonderful things came by. You'll see us swimming on the right, top right, and then right in the middle, you'll see a piranha. And that's the main reason why we didn't want to go swimming again, but the lower left corner there is a sign that says swimming time from 10 a.m. to 4:30. That's because you want to avoid the large caiman that are in the area because they're active at dusk and dawn. And so swimming at those times pretty much guarantees you that you won't get taken by a large caiman. It says do not swim close to shore because there are electric eels there. So you stay away from shore. Well, that combination of things plus the piranha that you see there really didn't make it too enticing for us to go swimming again. But like, I guess, good Canadians, swimming was on our list of things to do and part of our itinerary, so we all jumped in. And it was a lot of fun. Not too long after that, we had all left and Karen was relaxing on that dock and she did see a rather large caiman go swimming by. And so anyhow, we weren't too thrilled to go swimming again. Next slide, please. These are just some photos from the area. You can see the top left hand, we're motoring again down the Napo River. The center there is the walkway that leads up to the main hut or dining area, as I said. The far right, the Sasha Lodge sign, that's actually on the Napo River, and we're landing there. And we have a roughly 30-minute walk or hike into another area where we get into a canoe and we cross over to the lodge. Down middle lower area there, that is the main dock in front of the reception area and dining area. And to the left of that, there's a hut that has all kinds of gear, rain gear, boots, life jackets, things of that sort. And lower right is just us having another wonderful meal, which is just fantastic dining there. Next slide, please. This may be a transition, or I'm not too sure yet, but this is us coming out of one of the flooded areas, one of the channels. They maintain these channels, otherwise they would grow in. But we're pulling out again to explore one of our many canoe trips to explore the lake and the surrounds, and a lot of animals that we had seen, lots of frogs, lots of caterpillars. In the lower left there, it's hard to see, look up again, but there's a bird on the top of it's a tree that part of it is broken off, and the bird tries to mimic the look of the tree. It's a hawk of some sort, and regrettably, I didn't find it online. The name of it, I should say. Next slide, please. These are a series of images, again, from our excursions. Top left, there were bats that were they're quiescent in the daytime. They become active at night, but they're just literally hanging out. On the middle was one of the spider monkeys that we'd seen. There's a large group of them crossing over above us while we were in the canoe. Top right is that bird again that tries to mimic the look of the post. And really, we wouldn't have seen it unless our guide had told us about it. Lower right, there are some blue-headed Amazon parrots, and it's a salt lick or mineral lick. There are minerals in this clay that are apparently essential for these parrots. And so they come here every day to feed, and they're quite fun to watch. But you needed a pretty good lens. This was quite some distance up off the water, so it was quite difficult getting decent photos of. These are some small caimans that are right outside of our lodge area, Sasha Lodge, and they're really large. I'm using my pointer again. Sorry. So down the lower left corner there, again, the large buttress roots of a big kapok tree. So next slide, please. Yes, and one morning we woke up very early before sunup. We climbed this tower, the tower you see on the left, to walk the suspension bridge on the right. And we were about 30 meters off the ground at that point, and we watched the forest wake up. This is a massive jungle, really. My bird photos were not really good enough that you just saw a little yellow dot or a red dot off in the distance, but it was just wonderful watching the mist rise off the forest and the noise and the chatter going on. Really something to experience. Next slide, please. This is just a series of other views of the same tower, and you can see the expanse of the tower. It's quite large. Again, there's Ian taking a photo down the length of the tower. And you get all of these treetops. As I said, they were just alive with birds. I think we saw a sloth way off in the distance, but I was really straining with a pair of binoculars to see it. And that's just an example of the mist that's rising up above the forest. Here we are back in the flooded forest where the channels have been maintained for us, and we're paddling through. And we've got some images here. We can just go along with them and you'll see what we saw. This is one of our guides. His name is Klinger. Oh, and the other fellow ahead of him is Shanshu. And they were explaining various aspects of what goes on in the forest and how native peoples can pretty much find medicinal plants, others for food. And we were learning at one point how to fold a palm frond. And this will play for, I hope, not too long, but maybe another 10 seconds or so. The next day, rather than sunrise, we went to see a sunset. So on the left panel, you'll see a stairway that's built around a kapok tree. And we climbed that, well, after a long, well, it was really long, but after a canoe trip over, once again, into a channel, into the flooded forest. And then this was on some dry land, of course. And we climbed this stairwell up to the top of the tree. And on the right, you can see a view from that. And again, we're looking out over the landscape. And that platform that you should see in a moment is at about 40 meters. And so we're looking through part of the tree. The tree starts to just spread out and branch out laterally here. And I don't recall who took this picture, but anyhow, there's us up on the top platform. And then we went down back to our canoe, and that's when we saw the monkeys, although I don't have that photo, that was earlier. And so now I'll turn it over to Margaret to tell you about the hacienda.
So thanks, Les. If this wasn't enough sensory overload, as far as the trip goes, we did a 3-day, I believe, three and a bit day tour up into the Andes, going north from Quito. Our first stop was this hacienda. And it was a very interesting place. It really took me because of its history. I looked into it, and this hacienda originated in 1534. That was the year that the Spanish officially arrived and took over in Ecuador. The land was controlled by the Spanish crown, and what they did is they established a territory under one Spaniard to enslave all of the natives, and the landlord was to provide language instruction and conversion of all the natives to the Catholic faith. Then Spain eventually heard the abuse of natives that was going on. So they replaced the system with the hacienda, the idea of a hacienda, where the slaves then became laborers for the landowner. In 1964, the hacienda land was given back to the owners. Eventually, a family bought this property and turned it into a hotel after 1964. It is still within the same family that has owned it for all those years. And one of the descendants, Diego, runs it now, whom we actually managed to meet, which was really interesting. So with these pictures really quickly, at the top left, that's the front door going into the hacienda. And remember, this was built in 1534. And of course, there were additions onto the building as things progressed, but there you have it. The top center image is leading into the courtyard of the hacienda. We don't, the bottom left I'll go to is having lunch on the terrace that is facing into the courtyard. In the middle of the bottom, you see sheep and some other, I think there's turkeys or birds or something in there as well. So there was still some farming going on. The back of that is the church that was established for conversion of the natives to the Catholic faith. We did some day excursions. The top right, you see Mike Starr on a horse. Penny Graney, myself and Mike, we decided to go horseback riding, which was absolutely great because you really felt like you were getting back into the community and just hanging out and going around and then with the locals there. The other group decided to climb up the volcanic mountain that this is placed on. And they did a lot of walking around and took pictures of views and llamas and all sorts of other fun stuff. And in the bottom right, you see our dining room with us as a group having a great meal at the end of the day. Okay, next slide, please. All right, Les, you'll take this one.
Yeah, and so I've realized our Otavalo trip came after the next two slides, but that doesn't matter. We'll still make our way through this. The town of Otavalo is a town of 40,000 people in the highlands, the Andean highlands, at an elevation of about 8,300 feet. It's the largest textile market in South America, and the people in the area are expert weavers. And so there's all kinds of fantastic wall hangings, carpets, sweaters, all kinds of wonderful things you'll see on the top left is an actual image that I took from what you see on the top right, which is the Grand Condor building, which housed a group of expert weavers, and it was kind of a high-end location. What you see on the bottom left is an actual panoramic photo of the market in Otavalo. And that market, it's a bit difficult to see, but you can see a lot of color down the lower right of it. It's very much like what you're seeing in the top left. And unfortunately, I didn't take a lot of photos in the market myself, but really fantastic to see all these textiles, really wonderful, really colorful. There's Rebecca wearing her mask of some sort. And this is Karen doing some shopping. This inside the Grand Condor, again, was a loom. And there were other individuals, local people doing things inside too that you could watch and observe and do it. Let's move on to the next one, please. Okay, this is hiking up to Cayambe, and you'll see on the top left here, the trucks have stopped and it's very cold. The trucks couldn't make it through the snow any further, so we had to walk the rest of the way. Lower left, you'll see where the road kind of hugs that mountainside, and then way up at the top there, that's where we had to stop and turn around. Even turning around was a bit scary because the trucks were then looking down straight into the slope, and it was a bit scary. And they turned around, and we had to hike on up to the cabin, which you see here in the middle, lower. And the cabin, look that up. Oh, the cabin is at 15,000 feet. And that's quite extraordinary. Until that point, that was the highest I've been in altitude. And the hike up to that cabin was not easy. We had to hike up, I don't know if it was maybe a kilometer or so along the road. And every 30 meters, you had to stop. Your heart was just pounding out of your chest. You had to stop, catch your breath, wait for a few moments, and then start walking up again. And those hardy souls that wanted to go further, probably another 500 feet in elevation, you could go up to the glacier. And you'll see the middle, upper middle, you'll see the glacier that is on Cayambe. And Cayambe is permanently snow covered. And I think it's the only mountain on the equator that is permanently snow covered. And it still has a fair bit of glacial coverage, which is nice to see. But that was really wonderful to do that. Next slide, please. This is a geobotanical reserve, getting a bit closer to Quito again. The Palula crater. It is only the second inhabited crater on the planet. It's a fertile crater because there's a lot of moisture from the mist and the fog that happens to accumulate here. And so you can see down looking into the vista there of all the farms down there. And that was quite interesting to see. We drove right up there, so it wasn't too difficult of a walk for us to walk out there and get that image. And you can see us up in the top right, the nice photo of us, the crater in the background. Oh, next slide, please. Oh, Margaret, so you're up.
I'll take it from here. Thank you. So another stop that we made along this road trip was at a museum called Inti Nan Museum. This apparently is exactly on the equator. According to an online post, apparently that line that you see us straddling in the middle is approximately 0.02 degrees off of the actual equator itself. But realize too that the Earth does wobble back and forth, and so the true GPS of the equator can shift a little bit here and there. That I found out from a friend of mine who's a fanatic on these sorts of things. Okay. There is a concrete monument about 20 meters away that is supposedly marking the line. However, we did find out that we are actually on the true equator. Fine. Now, if you've ever heard these stories where if you're in the northern hemisphere, the water going down your sink should be going clockwise. And then if you're from Australia, you're down under and the water in the sink is supposed to go counterclockwise down the sink. So they decided as this wonderful demonstration, if they take this basin of water and cross the line into the northern hemisphere, they would pour a bucket of water into the basin and it's going to go clockwise down the little hole in the bottom of the basin. That's the Coriolis effect, exactly. And then they took the basin to the south side of the southern hemisphere side of the equator, and they poured the water in and the water went down counterclockwise. Well, the truth is it is a trick. It actually doesn't exist with water. The true Coriolis effect really is associated with the jet stream and air movement around the Earth. And it has more to do with the direction of airflow in things like hurricanes and typhoons, that sort of thing. So this is actually a wives' tale, but you can see that it's actually a trick because I managed to take a picture where on one side of the equator, they're actually pouring the water into the basin on one side of the basin, forcing the water to go down the hole in one direction, and then they pour it down on the other side of the basin, forcing it to go in the opposite direction. So I just thought that would be fun to, but it was a neat trick and it was fun to do while you're in a sort of museum. All right, next slide, please. All right, back in the Quito area, remember that Quito is actually at an elevation anywhere from about 2,800 meters up to 3,000 meters above sea level. So it is quite high up to begin with. And it is also at the base of the Pichincha volcano. So a guide drove us up to the base of this volcano where we were capable of taking a gondola lift ride, which takes about 20 minutes. And this gondola is going from about 3,000 meters up to 3,900 meters above sea level. So it does get pretty thin and cool up there. It is essentially the only gondola at that altitude. So it's one of the rare gondolas to take up at that altitude. At the top, we did some hiking further up the volcano side. So you see Roberta down in the left corner on the bottom there, admiring some of the mountain flowers. And then in the center there, you see Karen and Tammy who are having a chit chat and talking about the gorgeous view of Quito. And then over on the right-hand side, you see that amazing view of Quito below you as you're at the top of this volcano. All right, next slide, please. All right, Les.
Okay, so where our home base was for our excursion in Quito was this hotel called the Boutique Hotel Cultura Manor, or Cafe Cultura. I've heard it called a couple of things. And it's really quite amazing. It was built around 1930. It won some architectural prize in the 1930s. It was the elite, it was the club for the elites of Quito. Businessmen, politicians, etc., wealthy people would hang out here. It remained that for about 50 years, and then it fell into disrepair and it was closed for several decades until someone purchased it, I think around 2010 or so. I'm not exactly clear on that particular date, but they renovated it and it's stunning. You walk in, you can see the foyer down on the left corner and the stairs going up to some of the bedrooms. Some of the bedrooms had to be accessed from the outside of the building. It was really quirky that way, but every room was hand painted. It had a theme. Various guest rooms had names like Aphrodite, Persephone, Medici, etc., and they were decorated to suit that. But coming back to the hotel in the evening, you can see down in the center there the sitting room, which was just wonderful, just to sit and relax and chill for a little while. Really a fantastic place. There's a website. You can just Google Hotel Cultura Manor, and you can do a virtual tour on your own. We also had a free day to travel through the city. Only have a couple of photos, but Quito itself is a city of 2 million at an elevation that we talked about, just over 9,000 feet. By the way, they say it should take about 1 to 3 days to acclimate to the high altitude, but I never felt that I did. I guess because we went from one altitude, then we went to an even higher altitude. I don't know, but I felt it took a lot out of me moving around at the high altitude. Quito, by the way, is the second highest capital next to La Paz in the world. And Quito is located on the eastern slope of Mount Pichincha. We did hike over to the Old Town, and the Old Town is UNESCO World Heritage Site. And one of the only pictures that I really have is showing you the narrow streets on the upper right. Very narrow streets that are very hilly, so you're constantly going up and down. But it's a wonderful walk through. And also below that is the National Basilica, which opened about a little over 100 years ago. And it's the largest neo-Gothic basilica in the Americas. That's pretty impressive, actually. We didn't get a chance to go inside. There was a wedding going on, and but apparently you can at some times of the year or sometimes of the week, I suppose, tour the building. That would have been nice to do. And I'll leave it there. I'll pass it over to Jason and Roberta.
All right, thank you, Les. So after touring the Amazon rainforest, trekking through the Andes, and a week of high-octane scuba diving in the Galapagos Islands, if that's not enough, we decided to finish strong with climbing Machu Picchu, which was an amazing experience. So Machu Picchu, for those who don't know, is the 15th century Inca citadel that's located in the Urubamba province of Peru. Although it was known locally, it was not known to the Spanish during the colonial period and remained unknown pretty much to the outside world until an American historian named Hiram Bingham brought it to international attention in 1911. It has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And as you can see from some of the pictures here, it's really remarkable. And when you're there and to appreciate how these structures are built on the top of a mountain, how they got things up there, how they managed to collect water and develop a small society there is really kind of remarkable. To tour this amazing place, the departure point is usually from Cusco, which is the historic capital of the Inca Empire during the 13th to 15th centuries. There's a picture, a very famous picture in the bottom right of Cusco City there. Well, while you're on top inside Machu Picchu, you'll see quite a large number of alpacas that make their home there today. You can see a picture of one in the bottom left. Their fur is collected, and a lot of things are made from alpaca fur as well. You can see the center on the bottom. The four of us made the trek all the way up to the top of Machu Picchu. There are several trail options to get up to Machu Picchu. One of them is the traditional Inca Trail, but I think there was not permits available for that option. There was permits available to do the Salcantay Trail, which is a 75-kilometer over 4 days to hike. And thank you, Mike, for the next slide here. Again, so this Salcantay Trail, it's guided by guides, and it's a mule-assisted hike. So mules carry the majority of the gear and cooking, and there's a team of the guides that go ahead and set up base camp for you that moves every day. And mules help with that process, so you're carrying only a day pack with you. The Salcantay Trail, the Salcantay is actually a mountain. It's a very large mountain, almost 15,000 feet. You come on this particular hike, close to 14,000 feet in elevation. The small inset in the middle left shows a picture of us at the highest point of the climb. It's about 14,000 feet. From those chilly heights, you descend to subtropical cloud forests, and where you meet up with the ancient Inca trails that lead to a recently discovered ruins of Lactapata. From there, you get a really amazing view, which is shown on the right of Machu Picchu, which you would not get otherwise unless you took this particular trail. So from there, from Lactapata, you take a downhill walk through a large number of switchbacks to get you down back to the elevation. And then you go down to a small train station, which takes you to the final little platform up to Machu Picchu. So there are some options, I guess, if you don't want to do a large hike, there's different options to get there as well. As with many things in life, the destination is one thing, but it's all about the journey getting there. And for that, I'll pass it to my friend and fellow hiker, Roberta.
Thanks, Jason. It was a beautiful hike, but there were a lot of challenges. The altitude there makes it hard for you to breathe. And every few steps, you just have to stop and take a breath. The hills were really steep, and there were hairpin. Wow. Rocky patches, hiking stakes, but the surrounding beauty and nature and awe of the inspiring backdrop made the Salcante hike. Well, it just gave you energy to push on even when it was really difficult. Sometimes our pace was a little bit slow, and in order to make it to the desired destinations, certain things had to happen. Part of my snail's pace had to do with my camera and having to capture everything around us because it was just so beautiful. I actually forgot, but there were actually 2 times when they put me on a pony in order to get us to places in time. Once was to get to our campsite before sunset, and one time it was a treacherous downhill to make me, or to get me to lunch there. Camping, set up in the cold mountains. You can see on the left, that's the Salcante. And we had dinner in a kitchen dining tent. And that's the picture on the bottom, right? And we realized soon that it was only heated by the fires that cooked our meals, because as soon as they served our dinner, the tent became quite frigid. And on that leg of the trip, they even set up a luxurious outhouse tent for us, a little bit farther from our tents, of course. Next slide, Mike, please. Waking up in the cloud forest was pretty unreal. We were greeted by amazing warm weather, cocoa tea, and a curious chicken outside our tent. On the last night, our guide our hike and not do the last legs planned, and that would mean missing out on the Lactapata viewing site at the ruins, the picture that Jason just showed us, where you could see Machu Picchu from the other side. He said, at the pace you guys have been keeping, we'll miss the train and you'll have to walk all night to get to the next town. Next slide, Mike. Yeah. So we decided steadfastly and determined, we agreed and started our hike the next morning in darkness. Oh yes, his threat was to tell us if we wanted to reach that part, we'd have to start a hike at 4 a.m. in the morning. And we did it. And at Lactapata. And this is the cloud forest. You could see the clouds going through the mountains. It was just so beautiful. Anyway, the Salcante experience gave us icy mountain ranges, over the expanse of rock. It led us to the rainforest, marvelous waterfalls, and rushing rivers, all of them beautiful to see. Jason there was one spot where the rocks were smoothed out from the river, and he got a chance to experience bathing in the cool water there. There's cows all over the mountains at the beginning, and they were just seen all along the way grazing on the grass. Bottom left is the first campsite, and as you can see in the background, there's a little green tent. That's our outhouse tent. It was quite amazing to think that we actually hiked 75 kilometers. Some of the distance after the trek, the train we did make it to with plenty of time to spare. We actually booked for the Inca Trail, but somehow it got fully booked before our trip somehow. And anyways, by fate, it was for us to experience this wonderful piece of nature that was the Salcante, and we wouldn't have traded it for anything else. Next slide, Mike. The next slide is of us at Machu Picchu, and that's where we ended this adventure. Oh yeah, I guess questions, answers, Q&A.
Yeah, I'll take that over. Thanks, Roberta.
Thank you.
I know how you love that Salcante Trail, and I know how you are with a camera.
Right.
So we've had a few small questions along the way, but does anybody have any questions for any of our presenters this evening?
I noticed that one of the questions that didn't get answered was somebody asked if we had to quarantine about bringing anything into the Galapagos with us, such as plants, seeds, or whatever. They have a long list of things not to bring, and there's a lot of paperwork you have to complete to go over there, including getting there's a park fee that you have to pay, and before you pay it, you have to answer this lengthy questionnaire. So yes, there is a whole long list of things that are prohibited from bringing to the Galapagos, but nobody actually checked our bags. But that is a concern on the part of the on the part of the folks who are looking towards curbing threats to the Galapagos, because as the population expands there, even house pets are presenting a threat to the habitats in terms of what they eat. Yeah, so no, there wasn't anything that that was rigorously checked, but we were asked.
So Les, I have a question for you. How many days of diving did you do, and how many dives did you do?
I did 19 dives, and we dived from Sunday to Friday morning.
Friday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there might have been 4 of you who did every dive that we did on that particular.
I think so.
Yeah,
I slept and ate very well.
Yes, eat, sleep, dive. We love that. The trilogy, the perfect trilogy. Any other questions that we can answer for you before we wrap things up? Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you.
That's it. This is the last going, gone in terms of
Oh, wait,
answering
I'll
any
ask, how did you ever pack for all the different temperatures and weight restrictions?
Who are you asking that to?
I think that's weight restrictions. If you ask
who are
me,
you
it's
asking?
easy. If you ask me, it's easy. If you ask Rebecca, I'm a one bag packer. She's a 5-bag packer.
Oh, how did you pack for all the different? Oh, okay. So here's one of the things. We flew into Quito and we kept coming back to Quito. And depending if you did Machu Picchu or not, which I did not, we flew out of Quito. So if you're going to do additional adventures, we arranged with a hotel to leave luggage there as we went off and did various things. So when we landed in Quito, coming from Toronto on the first night, we were very late getting in and we had to leave for the Amazon the next day. I actually brought a very lightweight duffel because it was very, very restricted, the weight that you could take to the Amazon. And that was actually clothes that I wasn't going to be wearing it on the rest of the trip. So you're quite right, there's a lot. So actually brought an extra duffel, very lightweight, to pack to go to the Amazon and left the rest of the luggage at the hotel. Then we came back to the hotel. Then we went into the Andes, repacked and took other stuff. And then we went out to the dive yacht. So we repacked and left some stuff at the hotel. So that's how we managed to do it.
But the trick again is layers. The simple answer with all those different temperatures, it's all about the layers. So Rebecca, somebody wanted to know what your number 8 diving tip was. They didn't capture that.
My number 8 diving tip. Just a minute. Let me find that sheet. Oh, well, it's right in line with this. It's all about the layers. I said, bring enough swimsuits and rash guards with you to put on a fresh one, a dry one for every dive that you do, particularly in the cold season. And nothing like getting into a wetsuit time and time again. Yeah, so you feel a bit dry at the beginning anyway. So it's all about the layers, top side as well, and just echoing what Karen said. And remember your sunscreen, because we're very close to the equator and you can burn really easily, even though the temperatures might feel cool. So that was number 8.
So Margaret, I have a question for you. Someone asked if you would do the Amazon first or Galapagos first.
Oh, yeah, you're asking me. It's actually—
I think it's all personal opinion, so I'm just—
No, that's fine. My preference would have been to do the Galapagos first, to spend a day or two in Quito, acclimatize, make sure you're all together, then do the diving, because it is extremely strenuous. Unfortunately, we did the topside Ecuador tours, Sasha Lodge, in the 3 days first and then went on the Galapagos Sky for our dive trip. I found that by the end of the dive trip, I was exhausted of that because, like I said, the diving is high octane. So my personal preference would have been the other way around. But trust me, when you are there, or when you are on any sort of trip like this, especially when Rebecca is organizing them, you kind of forget about yourself and you are just in the zone where you just keep going no matter what until you drop into bed and sleep. So really, it's up to you. I think it's more of a personal opinion as to how you would organize the trip, and also what time and when you can match up the availability of hotels and tours, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Yep.
Any other questions? If not, Rebecca, do you have a—
the other thing is, in terms of, yeah, you gotta, whichever way you do it, you're gonna end up with a whole lot of wet stuff somewhere in your luggage. So I'm a big, because we went to the Amazon, everything was dirty and wet when we got back from that. So that just went into bags to be left in storage till home. Same thing if you do the diving first, you're going to have wet diving stuff for whatever you do next. So I'm a great proponent of packing everything in groups in. People use packing cubes, but I use huge plastic. I use plastic bags. Actually, I shouldn't be giving them an advert here, but President's Choice, their extra large freezer bags are wonderful for packing piles of t-shirts and this and that. You know, they're a great size. And, you know, so when we arrived in Quito and we had to, late at night, we had to repack for the Amazon, I had all those plastic packages already on the top of my luggage and the extra lightweight duffel I brought. So it was just about pulling that out and shoving those plastic packages already in. So that helps with stuff. So, I mean, I really enjoyed doing the Amazon first because I've been going very fast paced, and I liked, you know, just kind of slowing down, getting into vacation mode before we went out to the Galapagos. But it's all about personal preference. Yeah.
Rebecca, there's one more question here that I noticed. Rebecca, when are you planning the next trip to Galapagos?
I'm not planning a next trip to the Galapagos at the present moment. There's so many other places to explore. So I am looking at a number of different alternatives, but I'm not planning a next trip to the Galapagos right at this moment. If I went back again, I would be inclined to go and explore the warm season and what that has to offer. So stay tuned. I mean, if there was enough interest out there, we could be talking about it. But you know, the world is big. There's so many other places to explore. So I don't actually have a plan to go there at the present moment. All right.
All right, let's carry on.
All right, so final slide, Mike.
It's there.
There we go. All right, so I want to give a big thanks to all of the Galapagos trip participants who, although some of them couldn't participate in our seminar this evening, shared their photos and experiences. And I know that a couple of them have joined here along the way. So here we go. Great thanks to Les and Leanna Buck, Jason and Tammy Grenier, Margaret Kolatar, Roberta Lee, Karen Parisian, Mike Starr, Ian Thompson, and a big shout out to Mike Starr for having produced and engineered this whole pulling together this PowerPoint presentation from our thousands of photos and huge videos and getting it all down as we all kept submitting this, that, and changing our minds, and on it went. So thank you so much, Mike. There was a comment earlier on in the chat about how the video was segmented, you know, like it wasn't running smoothly. Mike, do you want to comment on the challenges of stabilization of video? People thought it might be because of the Zoom format, but no, I don't think it's that. It's.
If you were thinking about there was one video with sort of shimmering black borders. And that was because I forgot to finish the stabilization through there's a process to do it, but because it's been a bit of a long week. But it the editors that are out there now are pretty incredible, and the thing that I've been using is DaVinci Resolve, and they have a free version and a paid version, and the paid version is a whole $300, so it's really pretty affordable, and they're sort of using it as a platform to sell their gear. It's Black Magic Design, and they make a lot of high-end video broadcast stuff, but the editor itself is extraordinary and has an amazing array of tools and color grading and stabilization and a lot of other stuff. So
well, thanks,
I'm
Mike,
kind of learning that.
for that.
So,
Well, so as we wrap it up here, you can see that we do get around on our HHUC type trips, both underwater and topside, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So those of you who have participated in our travels to other places, I know share many fond memories of the places we've explored and the camaraderie that we've shared. This trip was no exception. For those of you who haven't yet been on one of our adventures, perhaps tonight's presentation has sparked your interest in joining us next time round, which we hope will be real soon. Until then, I want to thank you all for your interest and your questions, and good night to everyone.
Thanks, everyone.